So now that I have briefly explained how we share oil spill science, we are going to go ahead and hear more about the science itself. In particular, we are going to hear from the 4 GOMRI consortia located in the state of Florida and what discoveries they have made in the past decade that have impacted the state. Our first presenter is Dr. Tamay Özgökmen. And he is a professor at the University of Miami Rosenstiel School of Marine Science and Atmospheric Sciences and leads the GOMRI Consortia of CARTHE. If you can go ahead and share your screen, and we will allow you to begin your presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be part of this event. I'm here to talk about CARTHE program, which was funded very generously by GOMRI from September 2011 to June, July of this year. We had anywhere from 1 dozen to 2 dozen institutions, depending on the phase of the program. We had 3 shots at that. And our main focus was on the physical transport processes affecting oil spills from the bottom of the ocean. As you remember, this thing was coming from a small pipe engineering. So my background is engineering, even though I spent all my career in oceanography. This was really, to me, a connection between engineering and oceanography, an oil spill from a pipe becoming a major oceanographic event as it rises through the water column. And at the air-sea interface, as you know, I mean, this is like the most obvious thing. Atmosphere and the ocean come together, but it's also the hardest problem physically because it involves wind that is 100 times faster and air that is 1,000 times lighter than the water, and ocean currents, and across essentially discontinuity. Millimeters, everything changes, and that's where most of the oil was, near the interface. And this interface is moving. I mean, I'm stating the obvious, but those are really the challenges that we dealt with over the last 9 years. It was subject to hurricanes, and of course, the largest socioeconomic impact is when the oil spill hits the coastline. That's where people live, and tourism, and so on and so on. As you know, this year is another example of disasters happening every month. So we were taking it from offshore. This was the deepest oil rig at that time, all the way to the coast, and trying to understand the transport processes that make that happen. Oh my God, my screen is frozen. Maybe let's try this one. Okay, good. So I'm just going to give you a taste of the observational strategy that we used. We didn't go out to the ocean very often. We went only once a year. We didn't want to go there just to have a sampling of a little bit of ocean currents here and there. What we did was we organized ourselves around 1 major expedition per year. And this was a very important way for me to focus all these people, dozens of people, on the same thing: modelers, theoreticians, laboratory experimenters, and instrument developers, seagoing oceanographers, atmospheric scientists, you name it. They had to bring everything they got together and work together. Otherwise, there was no way for me to have these people work together on the same problem. They would just do what they want and present something. But this way, we actually brought some value added. And here's, for instance, an example of the type of experiments we did. We actually used the idea of overlapping platforms. In other words, we sampled the ocean using multiple sensors. For instance, here in this box here, we are using a bunch of drifters, and they are naturally following the flow and therefore giving us an idea about transport. In this little box here, we are flying a plane, and the plane detected this frontal region. Then we go there with the ship and sample even a smaller area in that with the ship and radar and all the other instruments the ship has. And then we can even go much smaller than that, fly drones and so on and so forth, all these kinds of small scale instruments. So this way we could actually zoom in 120 times, finer and finer and finer scale over the same area and sample all these scales simultaneously, which was a key aspect of what we wanted to do, rather than different times, different places, we were trying to see, progressively what's going on in detail. So let me see, I hope my videos play. So in terms of memorable moments, I would say GLAD experiment, Grand Lagrangian deployment, as we called it. It was our first experiment in which we deployed 300 drifters around the Deepwater Horizon site. It was very important for us because the consortium was freshly established and the experiment was planned to take place only 4 months after we received the funds. So we actually tried to buy the drifters. Nobody would build 300 drifters for that price with that time. So we had to build everything at Rasmus, which meant everybody had to work together, almost like 24 hours. And there were a lot of new postdoc students. They didn't know one another. They became very good friends immediately. And most importantly, the experiment worked well and paved the way. It was a success, it was like we didn't know what was going to happen, but it just worked. And that paved the way for a lot of other productive work throughout the years. Another interesting moment for me was our students were kind of trained during GLAD, but then the following year we had this Hercules moment. It was not really an oil spill, but it was like a fire. And then what happened was that GOMRI people, by that time we knew each other through weekly or not weekly, monthly maybe. It was at that time, I don't remember. It was monthly, or it was quite often initially. And people knew one another. We knew, who is where and who could do what, and everybody connected. And then we just joined forces. On our part, we sent some drifters. The students drove literally 18 hours, slept at the ship, and deployed drifters in the affected area. Let's see if the movie is playing. Good. So these kinds of maps were supplied to NOAA, Emergency Response Agency, as well as Steve Muraski's group took advantage of this drifter sampling. This is essentially indicating the areas that were influenced by potential oil spill. And they actually did their sampling along these areas and wrote a very nice paper on biochemical impacts of this in JGR. So that was a very nice collaboration. Another interesting thing I would like to emphasize here is that as I tried to do before, the oil during the oil spills is mostly, not all of it, of course, we know a lot more now, I don't want to get into that, but it's near the air-sea interface. The air-sea interface is a region of very, very intense gradients. Things change very, very fast. And what we are showing here is that two types of drifters that we were playing around with at the very beginning of the project. And this drifter has a stiff neck, rigid neck, and this one is a moving neck. And what you will see is these are in the same flow driven by the waves, and they will move, the left one will move 4 times faster than the right one because it's actually surfing the waves, whereas this one is filtering the waves. So these kinds of things were really critical for us to understand what influences the motion most near the air-sea interface and form the basis of a drifter that we designed, which was patented and used extensively in our experiments and also by other people. It's available, people can get it. In one of the experiments, this is near Destin, Florida, we were putting drifters in the ocean, and I had no idea how to interpret the motion. I just could not understand how they are moving until we got a search bus by Hans Graeber, synthetic aperture radar, and all of a sudden we realized all our drifters were located along the convergence zones in the ocean, and these convergence zones are created here, for instance, by the tidal plume that's coming out and propagating and actually protecting the beaches. And you see that also this kind of fine structure, freshwater plumes, this is actually temperature, but you have to imagine the other version near Louisiana Bight, and also near Taylor Spill. There's a nice paper we wrote near Taylor Spill. Taylor Spill was right outside of the mouth of Mississippi, but the oil would not go to the shortest distance, but it would just go far away to Florida and Mississippi. and maybe also interior, because the freshwater plume blocked its movement. So that's why it was it took 14 years to be closed, because people say, hey, there's nothing going on. And here is another example where we launched a perfect array of drifters near Louisiana Bight. This is not a numerical simulation, it's a real experiment. This is a ship sampling around the drifters. And you see there's a front, freshwater front, and the drifters bounce back like it's a wall. It's not the coastline, it's a freshwater front. So these freshwater fronts can really, really control the movement of the surface material. Here's an extreme example near Mississippi River Delta mouth. And we launched 300 drifters, and we were just looking what's going on. In a few days, all of them, as you see, converged onto a point. Okay, every time I see it, it's like stunning. And the convergence was 1 million times. It was the size of a city, 30 kilometers square to 30 meters square. And it implies very strong, so whatever is in this, at the surface is sucked down and sent in the third direction. We actually launched also at the center a Lagrangian float. That's an expansive three-dimensional float that follows, and very high vertical velocities were observed. So this is the ocean sinkhole. Somehow we detect, and we can detect it only if you have these large numbers of drifters. If you put 5, you will not see that. You need to put hundreds and just see what happens to them. In terms of outreach, we had a very extensive outreach program. We had very good people helping with that. Here you see students from high school. There's a high school across Erasmus Mass Academy, and we organize competitions to build drifters. So each student had a drifter design, and you know, somebody would win. You know, they would try it in the ocean. Some would sink. Some would, I don't know what happened. So people are engaged, thinking about, you know, what's the ARC interface. They look at it all day long. They never think in the terms of physics. So this was a way to instill, you know, to understand and get curious about the things that they always see, but they never, you know, think about it deeply. And once they think about it deeply, they realize how fascinating nature is. This is one of my favorite things. We deployed about 5,000 bamboo plates in the ocean, and we want to distinguish them from one another. And if you have a bunch of bamboo drifters, and this was observed by an aerostat camera, there's no way to distinguish unless you paint them differently. So the way we did this painting was we actually asked thousands of, not thousands, maybe a couple hundred high school students to paint this. This is biodegradable paint. It doesn't smell. It's water soluble. Bamboo is biodegradable. Nothing we put in the ocean after glad was plastic. And they, you know, we explained them the project, and they, you know, really participated. So this was a very nice event. Another thing we did was we realized a couple years into this project that most of our experiments are out in the ocean, and it takes a lot of time to explain about the Gulf spill. And, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years into the Gulf oil spill, people do not even remember what happened. Young people, they don't know. I mean, they're like 3 years old, become 12 years old, something like that. So time is important. So we wanted to connect these methods that we are developing to local communities. And Miami is particularly vulnerable to all kinds of pollution events. There's a Miami Beach has pumps to clear flooding, but they are pumped back into the bay. They don't really pay much, you know, they can pump it into Gulf, but they just do the cheap thing. So this part is always polluted. Now seagrass is dying, and there's all kinds of people complaining about it. Oh, what happened? I mean, you could see that 1 decade ago, okay? And then there's a nuclear reactor a bit south of here that's kind of leaking into the bay. And then we asked the question, what are the currents in this area? Nobody knew. Believe it or not, Rasmus is here for 6 decades. And so we turned this into citizen science event where high school students released our drifters. They all of a sudden realized that these drifters moved in all kinds of very, very strange ways. And they started thinking, again, Miami is a very much an ocean city. People are here for the beach, for the ocean. It's such a big part of the city's identity, yet people do not think about what's going on here. So this is what we wanted to instill. And it attracted a lot of attention. Miami Herald, we were on Miami Herald, the students, several times. But then what happened is there was a real sewage leak, and we got involved in a real sewage leak and showed that the sewage is really going around. This is the most expensive zip code in the United States, where billionaires live here. So I had to pull the plug because I didn't want to have any kind of legal issues. But it was a useful project overall. We also did scientific outreach. We wanted to know, for instance, whether these instruments can be applied to other places. In particular, Arctic is a new ocean. There's a lot of, obviously, interest from oil companies, both in US and Russia, to drill there. And then if you are going to go and sample the ocean, you need to be use biodegradable instruments. So our instruments were perfectly suited. One of my PhD students became a postdoc at Yale, and then he connected with through the contacts there with Canadian Coast Guard. So we actually sampled the Beaufort Sea using our drifters, and have a nice publication in JGR on that. In terms of meaning of GOMRI, first of all, I'm very proud of our publication record. We published over 200 papers, pretty on a disciplined way every year. And citations are, of course, we don't control citations, but they're coming up in a delayed way. These publications were in 62 scientific journals. And most importantly, this is an impressive number to me. We had 424 unique authors. So this is the number of people who were scientifically involved in our science. I would have guessed 100. I had no idea it was 400. We got 3 patents for various methods and instrumentation. And I would like to say that, I got funded by ONR, DARPA, BOEM, NSF, and a couple other agencies through the years. And I think this kind of productivity is only possible through the funding structure established by GOMRI, which was large scale, collaborative, a lot of funding, but a lot of pressure, time pressure, and I don't need to explain it to you. But that worked very well, okay? And that every agency has their own recipe, and to get this kind of numbers, you need what GOMRI did, I think, was the right approach. And I would like to say that this was graphic equivalent of the moon mission. Moon mission was very clear. You put a flag on the moon, land a person, and bring back, and everybody could actually visualize this, and it attracted, the clarity of the mission attracted a lot of people. And it was accomplished within, again, less than 10 years time frame. And then it was dissolved. And when they asked people in 1970, do you think man will land on Mars? And everybody said, by 2000, everybody said, of course. But it did not happen. And that's the interesting part, because science requires constant support, and you need to really support it for it to move fast. GOMRI was pouring money for the first few years, maybe didn't move, but then now they are not even funding us. Still publications are coming out. So you need to push it to give a lot of inertia, but then if you don't fund it, it dies. And this was not matched in 51 years. So I think now we are in a depression, I don't think that the record of GOMRI will be broken for a long time. That's my guesstimate. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Özgökmen.